Let's just take the issue of masks. Here's what President-elect Biden said this week.
I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days.
But back on April 3rd, when the CDC director, Dr. Robert Redfield, first recommended that all Americans wear masks, here's what happened, sir.
We know that a face barrier can actually interrupt the number of virus particles that can go from one person to the other.
So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. They suggest it for a period of time, but this is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it.
If President Trump had worn a mask then and urged everyone to wear a mask then, back in April, the way Joe Biden is right now, wouldn't we be in much better shape?
Well, Chris, I welcome Vice President Biden to the club. Since the middle of April, the president's guidelines for reopening have called for wearing masks.
President-elect, sir.
The president has called the president has called masks patriotic acts. Every one of his top advisors, we are out there saying, wear your mask. We talk about the data. You know, Chris, at 1 meter, if 2 people wear the mask, it can reduce viral transmission by 72%, protecting both the source and the recipient. We've got the data. Masks work. We encourage people, please wear a mask when you can't engage in social distancing.
But first of all, it's the president-elect, Joe Biden, Secretary Azar. And secondly, the fact is the president said on the first day, April 3rd, he wasn't going to wear a mask. He didn't wear a mask in public for 3 months until July. And just last night at that rally in Georgia, not only didn't he wear a mask, but I was watching the rally, thousands of people packed together, none I could see wearing a mask. That is a direct violation of what the CDC and you were recommending.
Chris, our advice is always the same. Wash your hands, watch your distance, wear face coverings when you can't watch your distance, and be especially careful of those settings like overcrowded indoor bars and restaurants or multifamily household gatherings where you're going to let your guard down and take that face covering off. So, Chris, our advice is the same regardless of the setting.
And regardless of whether the president ignores it or not?
Regardless of the setting, our advice remains the same. And the president has called mask wearing patriotic. We encourage people to wear face coverings when they can't maintain their social distance.
Chris Wallace has officially run out of patience for Trump mouthpieces who now, even despite a 7 million vote loss in the popular vote, despite a 306 to 232 loss in the Electoral College, despite losing 45 out of 46 cases to overturn the election results in courts, still refuses to acknowledge Biden's win. It is political theater for an audience of one, and that audience is by no means Chris Wallace. And it should come as no surprise that the same guy who refuses to acknowledge reality when it comes to the election is also trying to rewrite history when it comes to the issue of wearing masks. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar is pretending to, quote, welcome Biden to the club, as if he's only now calling for mask use while Trump has apparently been calling for it all along, which could not be further from the truth. Joe Biden has been calling on people to wear masks since April, only weeks after the virus arrived in this country. And he's repeated that message consistently. He repeated it on Twitter on a constant basis. He's been clear that he'll call on state officials to implement mask mandates.
I would call all the governors to the White House and say, and because there's a question, I think it can be answered in the positive, a question whether I can mandate over state lines that every single state has to comply. Our legal team thinks I can do that based upon the degree to which there's a crisis in those states and how bad things are for the country. And if we don't do it, what happens? But I would make the case. I'd make the case why it's necessary. I'd have the scientists arrayed to lay out in detail why. And I would go to every governor, and I'd go to governors relating Republican and Democratic governors, and I'd say, we have to have this national mandate. We must do it. And at a minimum, what I would do, I wouldn't walk around saying masks don't matter, like he said at your town hall.
He's even announced that one of his top priorities will be to ask every American to wear a mask for the first 100 days of his administration.
We talked about masking. It is important that we, in fact, the president and the vice president, we set the pattern by wearing masks. But beyond that, where the federal government has authority, I'm going to issue a standing order that in federal buildings you have to be masked, and in transportation, interstate transportation. You must be masked in airplanes and buses, et cetera. And so it's a matter of, and I think my inclination, Jake, is on the first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days. And I think we'll see a significant reduction if we occur that, if that occurs with vaccinations and masking to drive down the numbers considerably.
Contrast that with Donald Trump, whose first public sighting with a mask, one of only a handful at most to this very day, wasn't even until July, the week after Biden tweeted, quote, "Wear a mask in public, read your daily briefings, listen to the experts. This really isn't rocket science, it's common sense." We got reporting that Trump wouldn't wear a mask because he didn't want to, quote, "send the wrong message," and was concerned that he'd look, quote, "ridiculous." Those messages came out within a week of each other, in case you were wondering who should be welcoming who to the mask club. Even after Donald Trump himself contracted coronavirus, for which he was hospitalized, the first thing he did when he left Walter Reed was to stand on the Truman balcony at the White House and remove his mask like he just conquered a city. In reality, he didn't conquer anything, his life was in jeopardy, and he likely infected a number of administration officials and family members with his refusal to acknowledge reality, which, yes, is definitely a recurring theme in this administration. I mean, think about it. We watched as Trump's wife and sons, Barron and Don Jr., contracted it, Kayleigh McEnany, Stephen Miller, Hope Hicks, Bill Stepien, Nick Luna, Ronna Romney McDaniel, Kellyanne Conway, Chris Christie, Senators Mike Lee, Tom Tillis, Ron Johnson, even today, Rudy Giuliani himself contracted it. This administration has been a clinic in modeling exactly what not to do if you're trying to stay safe. And yet people like Alex Azar have the audacity to pretend that they've been modeling gold standard behavior all along. And beyond Trump's own recklessness, think about the damage that he's done more broadly. He politicized the use of masks, making them out to be some communist, socialist, Marxist tool of government oppression. He set the tone for millions of people who then went on to blindly repeat his talking points, even as their own friends and families and neighbors and coworkers and community members contracted the virus and died. All because Trump thought the optics of a mask made the virus look scarier. And God forbid we have any bad optics heading up to the election, because it was never about the American people, it was only about Donald Trump. So his administration officials can pretend that Trump has been some responsible voice of reason throughout this pandemic, but in reality, he has unilaterally caused more harm and death than any other figure in the United States, if not the planet. Every other country in the world dealt with the same virus that we did, but only the United States had the most cases and the most deaths on the face of the earth. The variable here is our leadership. This is what happens when the person with the biggest bully pulpit in the country uses it to spread denialism instead of facts. So now, looking forward, two things are true, regardless of whether people like Alex Azar want to admit it. The first is that Joe Biden will take office on January 20th, and he'll be the next president of the United States. And the second is that we'll finally have a president who cares about protecting the lives of Americans, who will be consistent in his messaging, and who will defer to scientists and public health experts to get this virus under control. And lives will finally be saved as a result of that. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.